February 14th. Good evening. For the quorum of the board present, both in person and online, call the February 14th, 2022 Queensbury Board of Education meeting to order. If you join me, please stand for a pledge of the flag.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please remain standing just for a moment. I wanted to take a moment. We had a tragedy again here in the school district, and with the passing of a 6th grade teacher, Michelle Bennett. So we'd like to take a moment of silence just to remember her and honor her and think of her family in this time. Thank you very much. We're starting with several presentations. Gannon, you want to lead us with the first one, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mannix. The first presentation, Mrs. Trollstra will introduce Mrs. Marcel and Mrs. Bergen.
Thank you, Mr. Gannon. Good evening, Board of Education. Is this on? There we go. Good evening. We are very, very excited to talk about Parent University. We mentioned this, I think, at the last board meeting. There are many, many offerings, and I want to just kind of go back in time. Actually, it was September 14th, where the admin team, the entire team, brainstormed kind of pie in the sky opportunities to connect families with the school and really look at not just academic, but also well-being, mental health, behavior, and then specific areas of ELA and math across all grade levels. So this evening, Rachel Marcel, who has really been tasked, our SEL director, with making these parent universities happen, is going to talk a little bit about the process. And then we have Kristen Bergen, assistant principal at QES, is going to highlight an actual parent university that took place. So I'm going to turn it over to them.
Good evening. Thank you so much for that introduction. So parent universities, I just want to give you a quick overview of kind of how they came to be, what they are, the why behind them, and go over some of the parent universities that we are having this year. So parent universities are really about family and community engagement and all about strengthening relationships. They bring the school community together, creating opportunities for our parents to partner with teachers, administrators, and other school and community resources. So there's many opportunities for collaboration and partnership with our parents and our school staff. So here's our schedule that started in October. I kind of broke them out by months for all of you. So in October, we had an SEL snapshot, which Mrs. Bergen will be going through shortly. We also had Dr. Jennifer Bouchant, who is one of the external resources that we partner with, presented. We had a parent tech in November, another parent tech for grades 6 through 12, and success at QMS, which was done by a school counselor and our school psychologist. In December, we also had another presentation by Dr. Jennifer Bouchant. January, we did early literacy. Another one by Dr. Jennifer Bouchant, and then we recently had one on social media, cyber safety, and cyberbullying by one of our state troopers, Stephen Rothline. That was absolutely fantastic. It was an opportunity to really explore a lot of what is going on in the world of social media with teenagers, especially today. He had a lot of great information that he shared, as well as took a lot of parent questions, and he was very engaging with our families and allowed for a lot of great conversation to occur. So it was very kind of him to do that. In February, we have coming up next week, sport performance, or this week, sport performance for the high school athlete. We also have another presentation by Dr. Jennifer Bouchant. I will be presenting in March on building school family partnerships, engagement and attendance matter. So I'm working on that one currently. And then we'll have another one by Dr. Jennifer Bouchant at the end of March. We'll also get into healthy cooking on a budget. I'm super excited about. I really tried to work with all departments to put these together. April, we will have a tips and tricks from our WHBI. We'll also have another presentation by Dr. Jennifer Bouchant. We'll have some preparation for Regents exams for our high school students, and then we will finish it out with Zones of Regulation Part 2, which I believe Mrs. Bergen will also be a part of, and is a follow-up to what we started with. So as you can see from the schedule, we have a lot of homegrown internal experts kind of sharing their knowledge with our parents, with the community. We have our RTI teachers, our literacy coaches, our psychologists, our counselors, our administrators, our teachers. Everyone has just been so willing to impart their expertise and put together presentations, which I think has absolutely been amazing. It's been a super collaborative effort, which I'm really proud of. So I mentioned Dr. Jennifer Bouchant. She is one of our external supports that we partnered with to deliver 7 parent universities that were very much focused on overall wellness, including topics such as anxiety, sleep, and intrinsic motivation. Are a couple that she has delivered, and she will continue presenting right through May for us. And then the other external support that I've already mentioned was Trooper Stephen Rothwein from Troop G. He is the School and Community Outreach Coordinator. This is a picture of him actually presenting a very similar talk at a local school. That's part of what he does on a regular basis is visit schools or do online trainings right now since the COVID pandemic has us at home a little bit more. But he was just absolutely fantastic to work with. And again, was very open to all of our parents' questions. And very, very supportive and honest about being a dad himself and kind of what he does to keep his own children safe. And communications, I really can't say enough about our communications team here at Queensbury. They were such an integral part of making this a success. They created our little logo, which you can see with the little cat. On the left there, they're congratulating parents for their enrollment into Parent University and advertising several of the ones that were very specific to QES. So they constantly are creating communications that can go out through school messenger, email, or any platform to get to our parents so our parents know about our upcoming programs. But they have been absolutely fantastic and an integral part of this process.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kristen Berg, and I'm so excited to be here. Last spring, we offered a program on social emotional learning for our families, and the feedback we received to them, because we always do a post-assessment with our families, was we want to learn more about what you do. And that created this program this past fall to kick off the Parent University. It's called the SEL Snapshot. We want to just give a little glimpse into what we do. And part of our feedback after having the presentation was asking families what they would like to see more of, so we would know what to present in the spring. One of the greatest things about this program is this school staff partnerships. We had so many people, our school counselors, Mrs. Beecraft and Mrs. Dawkins, our social worker, Melissa Gates, our Dean of Students, Deb Hansen, and then we had 3 teachers, Mrs. Heydrich, Mrs. Lucius, and also Mrs. Judge, one of our special education teachers, all partnered together to develop this plan. So our goal was to have parent connection. So you'll see on your tables, I provided you the packet that we provided with families, and it goes along with our slides this evening. We wanted to make sure that families had something tangible in front of them, because one of the pieces of feedback we received from families is they want something to put in their refrigerator, or they want like a go-to resource to have in hand. And then at the end, we did a Q&A panel discussion. So we asked parents questions in advance, so they wouldn't feel like they were on the spot, and then our staff members were prepared with those answers. So you'll see right here, this is one of our programs. It's Kelso the Frog. He's on our announcements on Wednesdays for What Would You Do Wednesday, and we'll talk about him in just a minute. John, if you can switch the slide for me. It'll seem tonight like we have several programs, but they're actually very purposeful and intentional and strategic in their placement and also the skills that they build. So in the first part of kindergarten, we do the self-regulation curriculum. That's the first few pages of your packet, we actually teach students how to just emotionally regulate. How are you feeling and what kind of breathing techniques can you use to be able to feel settled and ready to learn? So that's a September through December program. And after that, we move into the zones of regulation, which we'll talk about in just a minute. The next thing you'll see in your packet are called verbal scripts. Our whole school has been trained on these verbal scripts. And the idea behind this is that when a child becomes dysregulated or starts to struggle for some reason, we want to intentionally simplify that language because the child will have a hard time using their working memory and their emotional self to be able to get settled down. And with all of the adults in the building speaking that same language, they have that consistency, whether they're in a special area or the classroom or in our office or at the bus. And so families really enjoy this. You'll notice on the front, you'll see the visual, because some students are not able to process words right away when they're upset, but that visual is helpful. So a lot of our staff members carry these little laminated cards with that, but it'll also give you the script as to where to use them on the back. So they're really helpful. When we have a child in our office or in the classroom, it's really common to say, we can keep this a little deal by doing this, and then saying, what's your plan? So we understand they can verbalize the plan and they're ready to move on to their next part of their day. And then next we have the zones of regulation. This is introduced in the spring and kindergarten, and we use it throughout our school, all the way through grade 3. And the idea of this program, again, is that emotional regulation. Different people have, humans have a variety of emotions. We need to be in that green zone to be ready to learn. And so our goal with this type of visual is to help students realize what they might need to be ready to learn, be ready to be social, be ready to be in a special area, be ready to go on the bus, so we can individualize it over time. That's a separate curriculum and our guidance counselors push in. And then lastly, again, it seems like there's a variety of programs, but they're very intentional. This program called Sels Choices is designed when a child's already has that emotional control, but they might have normal social conflict that comes with being a child. It's really common for us to start seeing some social conflict around the second half of 3rd grade. As students become kind of more, individual, they start having stronger opinions and stuff, and teaching kids how to navigate that is really, really helpful. So this program teaches students to identify what's considered a little deal or a big deal, when to get an adult for help, or when to try some strategies on their own to be independent. And that is our SEL snapshot. Thank you.
And lastly, I just wanted to touch base on kind of the plan for next year for parent universities. I'm spending a lot of time definitely listening to stakeholders, our district wellness committees, district health advisory, all the different committees, your decision-making teams, everything that I've had the opportunity to be a part of, and really listening to where do we want to put some time and energy into parent universities for next year. So as you can see up there, some of the different things we're looking at are, really strengthening parent and family connections, student engagement, attendance, wellness, and then really that piece of electronics education and awareness, the safety and the mental health piece that comes along with teens consistently on phones, apps, all of the things we kind of just went through with the state trooper who was nice enough to do one of our parent universities. So I'm in the planning phases for next year. So if anybody has ideas or suggestions, please feel free to reach out. Any questions?
The parent universities, are they targeted primarily just to parents, or do you recommend that students attend as well, or children of the parents?
There are some that definitely I would say students can participate in, like especially the ones we have coming up on nutrition and cooking. And, I would say some are definitely geared more towards the parents. Like a lot of the parent tech ones we did were really helping the parents understand the different apps we use at school, the different platforms that they can log into and utilize. So I don't know that they would be as fruitful for the students, but I know one of the things looking forward to next year that we may like to do is some combination ones where parents can come with their child for some of that social media education, especially. Yeah.
Anybody online? Stacy or Pat? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have a presentation on the seal of biliteracy. The seal of biliteracy is something we've worked on in our high school for several years. It's where students would be proficient in 2 languages. And it's a lot of work for the students, and the faculty have embraced it. So I've asked Senor Collins, and I believe he has a student with him as well, to present about the seal of biliteracy. So thanks, Senor.
There we go. Good evening. Can everybody hear me now? Let's see. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, great. All right. Well, thank you very much for letting me speak on this amazing new program. So good evening, buenas noches, bonsoir, konnichiwa, ni hao. So I'm very excited about this program that we implemented. We started in 2019, and then last year was our first official year of doing the Seal of Biliteracy at the high school. So do you know that many of our students can speak more than 1 language at home? So this is very interesting. You know, we don't always see a lot of diversity in 12804. And so for many of our students, they're 2nd generation Americans. So they're the first in their families to come through the Queensbury School District. And so they learn English at school, but then they speak other languages at home. So not only are they bilingual, but they're also bicultural, and they're navigating the world as part of 2 societies, 2 communities, and through 2 languages. But we also have who have been through our unparalleled and amazing language program, who don't speak another languages. The usefulness and the benefits of diversity has been an awesome program for us. So this is showing that the Seal by Literacy is now catching on across the nation. So New York was one of the first to adapt to the program in 2016, and it's been growing ever since. So why does QHS offer the Seal of Biliteracy? So sustainment, the mastery of 2 or more languages is important. All right, everyone knows that so many countries around the world, they have their native language, but they also speak English. And so there's a very high focus of learning other languages in other countries. And so for here, sometimes that is put on the back burner, but this statement shows that that is a very important skill to have these days. And some honor the multiple cultures and languages in our community. You know, there's just so many people here, you know, who are moving in from other places. And so now we're seeing a lot of diversity around. And so it's really kind of a way to expose people to those different cultures and those different communities, and to kind of be part of something that's kind of that's new to all of us. And of course, preparing students for 21st century. You know, we've been doing this, you know, for years, and to be college and career ready. We all know that the world is getting smaller and smaller. You know, a lot of us are on the Zoom right now, you know, and being able to communicate with people around the world. This is going to be something that is going to benefit them, not just in high school, not just in college, but after as well. And to encourage students to study a language. You know, oftentimes in our program, you know, we teach them that, you know, knowing a language, learning a language is not just about the grammar and the vocabulary, but it's about the people. It's being able to see the differences and similarities among people who are different from them. You know, and the world is opened up to you through knowing another language. You're going to meet people and, you know, forge friendships with people who you may not necessarily have ever talked to, but because you have that common language, that's something that's going to start like a whole new world, a whole new friendship. So that's one of our focuses in our program as well. So the seal significance, so at graduation, if the student achieves the seal, so they get a seal that is placed on their diploma, and they also have a medallion that is worn at graduation. And so this medallion and the seal recognizes the proficiency in the areas of speaking, writing, listening, and reading in English and another world language. So who could earn the seal by literacy? And actually, here's a picture of our group from last year. So it's awarded to any student who has English as a language, and then they have studied another world language. So the world language could be their primary language, and English could actually be their second. So it just depends on each student's
individual situation. And so the requirements for the seal. So I'm going to kind of run through this in the next slide. But they, through this program, they have to have 3 points in English and then 3 points in their world language. So then the breakdown of this is they get 1 point for achieving in 85% their junior and senior year in their English class. And then 2 points of this come from a portfolio. And so the portfolio can be a paper, it can be an essay, it can be a presentation. So it's very open-ended of what it could be. And so that portfolio has to demonstrate their proficiency in the speaking, writing, reading, and listening. And so then once the portfolio is completed, then they have a presentation done to the SEAL committee. So the SEAL committee reviews the presentation, the portfolio, whichever they've chosen, and then they have a short Q&A with the SEAL Biliteracy committee. Now, the presentation of the portfolio has to be in the English language. So this does not have to be from an English class. It can be from anything from, if they did a research paper in art, if they did it in chemistry, if a student's in the IB program and they want to use their internal assessment for math, whatever it happens to be, it just has to be in the English language. So when we often say English, that's what we're referring to. It just has to be in English. Like, for example, last year, for one of the students who I evaluated did hers in English on, it was a physics paper about how much the air volume made, like how that affected how high the ball bounced. Of course, that's way beyond my expertise, but it was super interesting because the student knew all about that. And so they were presenting this paper, and it was, it was something that I had no idea about. So we learned a lot about it too. So it's very interesting on that respect. And then for the world language, it's almost identical. So they have to have an 85% in their level 4 or 5 class. And then the same situation, they have to have a portfolio or project paper, whatever they choose. And then it has to be in whatever world language they choose. And so same thing, they have that paper, that presentation, and then they go before the committee, which usually consists of 2 people. And so they present it, and then there's the follow-up questions. And so all of that is done in whatever that world language happens to be. And so then we have native speakers. So their situation is a little bit different. So they'll have they still have to do their presentation in English, but for any language that we don't have at Queensbury, so anything that is not English or sorry, not Spanish or French, they have to take an exam, which we set up for them in that language. And they also still do the portfolio and the presentation. This gets a little bit tricky on my end because I have to find people in the community who speak like Ukrainian, who speak Russian, who speak Turkish. And, there's not a lot of them around. So sometimes that gets a little bit tricky trying to find someone who can evaluate their presentation. So it just depends on whatever language they speak. We set them up. And again, we're probably going to end up actually doing them over Zoom because that works out easiest with most people's schedules. So these are members of the SEAL committee. And so they're all members from the high school. And so we get the French department, Spanish department. We also have social studies department, like Monica Kosha, for example, and Lisa Fort from science. And it's very interesting for me. For example, Monica speaks Russian. Like, I didn't know she spent a year in Russia. And Lisa speaks French. So you really get to see a lot of different sides of different people. And so, like I said, I've been learning a lot through this process. And so these members have been an integral part of our entire process. And so our cohort, so last year, we had 12 students who achieved the SEAL Biliteracy, and we had 13 medallions that we were rewarded. So we had 9 for Spanish, 1 for Russian, 1 for Urdu, and then 1 for Spanish and French. So we had 12 last year, and this year we have more than doubled our enrollment. So we have 27 students who are currently enrolled into the program. And currently our languages are French, Russian, Spanish, Turkish, and Ukrainian. So if anybody speaks Turkish or Ukrainian, let me know, because I'm going to be looking for somebody for those evaluations. And so to speak on behalf of the SEAL, first I've asked Natalie DeJohn, who is a senior in the IB program. She's also a French student to speak on behalf of the Seal of Biliteracy. So Natalie, if you're there, you can unmute.
Hi, I'm Natalie,
No
and
problem.
I wanted to do the French seal by later kind of earn. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I think now we're better. The little
Oh,
technical.
okay.
There you go.
Okay. All right. Can you hear me now?
Yep, now you're good.
Okay. Awesome. So I have been taking French for 6 years since 7th grade, and I feel that this seal and award can kind of show all the hard work I have put into French. And I love to travel, so kind of having this on my diploma can show that I know more about other cultures. And when I travel to France, I can even communicate better with other people. It also kind of improves my diploma and makes me look better as a student for colleges. And I felt that it was a challenge, and I kind of wanted to take it on and try something new. And so far I've done the English portion, in which I used an essay from my English class, and I reviewed it before I went in, and they kind of asked me questions about kind of like my sources I used and like what the process was like for when I was writing it. So it kind of went into depth about definitely my English and proficiency. And I haven't done the French one yet, but you just need to like use a piece of work whether you've done in class, or you can kind of do your own research, and then they ask you questions to show your proficiency in French, which I'm excited for. And I'm very excited to get this award and seal.
Great. Merci, Natalie. And next we have Emma Slepik, who is a COSER student in the IB program. And she is coming to us from South Glens Falls. Although technically she's never been in South Glens Falls. She's been in Queensbury her whole time in this area. But I've also asked Emma to speak on behalf of the program. So Emma?
Hi, can you all hear me okay?
Yeah, you're good.
All right, great. So before I went to Queensbury, I lived in other countries abroad. And in a lot of the international schools I went to, language was really prioritized. So I've been taking Spanish since I think 2nd or 3rd grade. So I've definitely been taking it for a long time. And having the opportunity to have all of that hard work recognized in the seal, I think is amazing. And I think, yeah, it's just a great opportunity to show my proficiency in the language. And yeah, when I go to other places, it shows that I have a better understanding of the world around me, and being international minded. That's definitely really good for the IB program that I'm in. So I think that's good. Currently, I am signed up for the English portion. I haven't taken it yet, but I'm going to also be using an English essay from my IB English class. So I'm really excited.
Perfect. Gracias, Emma. Great. And to speak of what Emma just talked about, we have a little star in our midst. So many of you know Rachel Beth Mannix, and she wrote this amazing piece that was published in the Post-Star yesterday, right there, talking about the benefits of teaching foreign language to young children. So as we talked about, other countries, it is a priority, and they do start very young. And unfortunately in the US, just as a kind of a trend, we just don't. So I encourage everybody to go and read this awesome article. And Rachel is actually going to be doing her seal of biliteracy in French and Spanish. So she's going to be the seal of triliteracy. All right, so for the next steps for the seal, so we're going to be continuing to grow our cohort as we go through for the next year. So like I said, we've doubled the numbers into this year, so I'm very excited about that. We're going to continue to communicate the opportunities of being able to do this seal with the families and the community. We hopefully have more opportunities as the world starts opening up a bit more for students to actually get out and use those languages. And in May, I'll be speaking back with everyone when we have our curriculum renewal presentation. So at that point, I believe that meeting is on May 23rd, which at that point, we all of the students will have gone through the program and we'll know exactly how many are going to be getting the seal. And so I'm hoping that probably in June we'll be able to have a little ceremony where we'll be able to hand out the medallions to those students. All right, any questions for me?
Questions from the board? Senor Collins? Anyone online? Stacy, Pat, Amy, Mike, any questions for Senor Collins?
All good here. Thank you. This is a wonderful
Okay,
thing.
English, French, Spanish, whatever one you guys want.
Senor Collins, thank you very much. Appreciate
All
you.
right, thank you. Have a great night.
Thank you. Next, we have a nice recognition, Mr. Gannon.
Thank you, Mr. Mannix. We have the pleasure, so years ago, the William H. Barton Intermediate School started its journey to becoming a school of character. And it's a long journey. It's really lifting up your hood, reflecting, looking at all your programs, looking at your school life, school culture, climate, social and emotional learning, student engagement, academic achievement. It's a whole comprehensive look. And 2 years ago, I charged all the other buildings with starting that process. It's a long journey, but we're very, very fortunate. We had 2 emerging schools of character, which happened at our middle school and at our elementary school. But our high school in particular really prevailed. So the WHBI is a national school of character, and they have to re-up their certification, I believe next year is the process. It's a very, very comprehensive approach. But our high school this year won a New York State School of Character. So I'd like to recognize Mr. Switzer, Mr. Ham, and Mr. Snide and their staff tonight. So if you guys can come on up. I'd like to have everyone give a warm welcome.
And our fourth presentation this evening is going to be a budget presentation from Mr. Whittemore. And Mr. Whittemore, please.
I appreciate the opportunity to speak in front of the board. I appreciate the opportunity to speak in front of the board. The budget process is
So I apologize for the technical difficulty.
Turn that one off before these. Turn that one off, Scott.
This one's off, yeah. Oh, what's that?
John, go ahead, John.
All right, so the first slide here, I wanted to start out with the board goals, and I'll take a moment to read through them while John works through the mic issue. So the board goals that the board adopted a couple years ago Goal number 1, all students will graduate prepared for college and ready for civic engagement committed to lifelong learning. Goal 2, all students will think critically and creatively, communicate in an all-inclusive manner, and adapt as technology evolves, persevere through setbacks and adversity. And goal 3, all members of the school community will maintain a campus-wide environment that fosters safety, empathy, and wellness. So those goals are really the framework and the foundation for the budget planning. The budget planning is more than a single day in May for which we go and adopt the budget. It's a continuous process that we work as an educational leadership team with the different stakeholders, the Board of Education, the principals, and the citizens to ensure that we have funding in place to best support the students. What I've listed here are some of the 3 pillars of that, how our long-term financial planning, which is fundamentally based around human resource leadership, tax cap management, and reserve management, and really maximizing expense-based driven aids, how those feed into future capital projects, and how those capital projects and the associated debt schedule and building aid can really build on the educational program. Mr. Gannon, Mr. Polster, and I have spent a lot of time talking about this sort of concept of continuing to invest in our students' education and how these 3 ideas really tie together in terms of what the educational programs be able to support both in next year's budget and long-term. It's important to come back to this of where the district is financially. The district stands about as healthy as it has in several years in terms of its financial health. One measure of that is the comptroller's fiscal stress score. The comptroller looks at different facets that we've not brought back to the board in a while. I wanted to just take a moment and talk about those. So the comptroller looks at all the school districts throughout the state, and several of them will fall into this either in high need stress or susceptible to stress. And they'll look at concepts like fund balance to budget, consecutive years of operating surplus or deficit, and low cash to high debt ratios. The district in 2016-17 was trending in some of those in directions that we didn't like. We have made some corrections over the last few years to adjust that, and we continue down that path today to keep the district in a strong financial position. Those changes, the work we've done over the year, have really been about investments. This is a unique budget in many different ways, especially considering the significant amount of federal funding that's supporting the school district. This budget that we put out in combination with the federal grant money will have the highest amount of teacher professional development, I think, in probably the last decade. We're making significant investment in after-school clubs with the growth of clubs significant this year and plans for the years to come. Investments in social emotional learning, before school supports for education, and small group instruction in the way of furniture to really support students learning in a 21st century classroom. Where you'll see projected budget growth, and we'll refine this over the workshop on the 28th and for the board meeting on in early March, we expect to see significant increases in program salaries and the associated benefits. I believe one of the slides later talks about where the money's spent, and as you would expect, it's spent on the teachers' programming, and so that's where we expect to see significant budget growth as we go down the journey of settling outstanding contracts with the different unions. What's unique about this budget, and it's something I thought I would never see in my lifetime, is the way the state of New York has committed to funding foundation aid. The state of New York, probably a decade or so ago, maybe even longer, had campaigned for fiscal equity settlement for a lawsuit where they were going to implement a funding formula for the school districts in the state of New York based on how poor those schools were, how wealthy those schools were relative to the rest of the state. Queensbury falls right in the middle of those measurements. There are some significant school districts with significant wealth and some on the other end. But Queensbury as a district, the taxpayers, the children, the people who work for this district were negatively impacted by the way foundation aid was distributed, the way it was frozen, and the way it was never given to school districts in the way their wealth measured up comparatively. in the way the federal government distributed significant amounts of aid to the state, specifically New York, Governor Hochul has committed significantly to fixing that wrong. So the Queensbury School District is going to receive a significant increase in foundation aid that every year the state will put out these formulas of Queensbury, here's how much money you should receive due to the foundation aid formula, but then go ahead and never distribute those funds. That is being remedied in this budget, and it's a significant benefit to everyone involved. Talk about where the state spends money. They spend money in really two places. They spend money on health costs. Medicaid and the Department of Health are a significant amount of the state's budget. Other social services are large, but education is a significant amount of the state's budget. So when the state seeks to allocate funding, when the governor puts out her initial budget and to work with the legislatures of how that gets distributed, a significant amount of money and where funds need to go have to get shifted through education. So I think this context is important as we talk about how the state's doing. And the state has made a big commitment in terms of how to distribute aid. State aid is really distributed in two ways. It's distributed based on relative wealth, which is this foundation aid concept, and the rest of it is distributed through expense-based driven aid. So transportation aid, the aid you receive on the buses, BOCES aid, building aids, those are smaller amounts of what the state distributes, but they're based on expenses from the year before, but the majority of it is related to foundation aid. So these numbers on a statewide level are significant. It's a significant increase based on years past. And you can see it flowing through the poverty-based, wealth-based aid formulas. And not only are these numbers significant, I think we have to look at the scale of them from years past. And these are historic foundation aid increases. These are big numbers. They're in the billions. And you can see the years where they went up. You can see the cycle here with foundation aid where it's funded up to about $1 billion. Then we have some worse economic times. You can see the pandemic in 2020-21, where we as a district were looking at 20% aid cuts. And now you can see the federal support coming in and this huge increase in restoration of foundation aid, where schools like Queensbury have had significant negative impacts of foundation aid have been restored. They've made that commitment for, you can see 2 years. You can see what the third year is, what they're representing. It is continuing that investment. There's some particularities where some schools did worse, like Queensbury, some schools did better, and they're bringing them all to sort of level playing field in that third year. But I think part of the point I'd like the board to take away from this is a huge increase, and the state itself is starting to plan to back that increase off in years forward. When we talk to our peers about how the state's doing, the state is doing well. You worry about fiscal cliffs. The state has put out a 7-year budget projection of their own significant revenues, with their own sort of planning and fund balance management, where they look like their point where they do not have a fiscal cliff with some of their additional revenue streams that they have coming in. So where does money get spent at Queensbury? Actually, where does money come in terms of Queensbury? It's a split, but it's more towards taxes. You can see the tax levy increasing over the last 4 years and projected to increase next year. But we have a sizable jump in state aid projected for next year. And if you look at last year, you see that a large increase in terms of percentage of federal aid. So that is federal aid flowing through the year we're in right now, and then it dropping back off. So as a sense of scale, that federal aid is significant. As a sense of scale, that foundation aid is significant. But a majority of our money does come through taxation and through the taxation of local citizens. I think it's important we see that, acknowledge it, and discuss what that means. In terms of the aid categories that are coming through, Queensbury has been stuck at about this $15 million foundation aid from the state every year. The expense-based driven aids have increased mostly because of building aid. That's come on. We had budgeted for big aid cuts in 2021, but now you can see it's jumping up from 15 million, 16 million, and then into 18 million in terms of foundation aid for 22-23. So it's a significant opportunity for the district to continue its investment cycle in its educational program and in terms of its expense-based driven aids in terms of the buildings. When we look back at our own history, this can't be overlooked either in terms of some decisions that we want to base tomorrow's decisions about and the things we have to do in in the next few months. The district has typically gone out with a tax increase around the 2% mark. The last few years have been closer to 3% as we've tried to align structural deficits that were causing those issues we talked about in the beginning. I point out to the 08, 2010, 2011 years where we had 0% tax levy increase. I think there was tremendous pressure within this different schools community not to raise taxes those times. I would note that some of those decisions to not raise taxes in those years had a role in some of the challenges of having structural deficits in the out years. So we must be mindful of that as we plan into next year's budget. Inflation is a big story. And if we didn't have this federal piece, the foundation piece, would be the biggest story. We are really capped at 2% in terms of our local levy growth. When about 55% of your money comes from the local levy growth and it's capped, that becomes a challenge that has to be managed. This year, there are different measurements for CPI and for inflation, but for us, in terms of what we have to do with the tax gap calculation, it's close to 4.5%. And we as a district can only go out at 2% in terms of levy growth. Important context around that, and even the slide itself has the context needs to be talked about. The tax rate for the district has generally remained flat over the last 5 years. The town does a very good job of reevaluating properties, so that has an impact on why this is flat. And so that context is not lost on us, but I think this is an important note to the Queensbury residents that we have generally been, I think, when the line is flat in terms of tax rate growth, that's a good thing. Building aid, we continue to work through those expense-based driven aids. District's done a very good job in partnering with BOCES, maximizes transportation aid, things that even we're going to talk about a little bit more, and continue to build on building aid. Again, these are not huge jumps. It's an incremental creep towards having more building aid, being able to lower the tax burden and offset the costs of both buildings and subsequently instructional costs. So to come back to this, there's a big change in this budget that we want to bring forward, and the timing of the budget always happens fast. Typically, we go out for 2 propositions and 3 things the voters vote on. They always vote on the board seats. They always vote on the budget. And typically, they voted on the buses. I'll talk a little bit about why we're going to make some changes there. We're no longer going to have to vote beyond the buses and remove that proposition, but we'd like to ask the Board of Education to put forward a proposal to the voters for a capital reserve in the amount of $4 million. The probable term of that between 5 and 10 years, likely be at the 10-year mark. We would use unassigned fund balance, so fund balance not earmarked for anything else, as an investment to reclassify it to a capital reserve. And we'd like to invest that into this building right here. We've had some fantastic conversations with teaching staff and the different stakeholders to kind of brainstorm about where there can be instructional changes within this building, ideally going out for a project in the 2023 December timeline. This is not the kind of slide I want to put up in this budget workshop. It's more for a finance committee, but I really wanted to point out a couple things. If we were to use this $4 million capital reserve as the seed money for this investment in this school, and we use $35 million as an example number. That number has in no way been finalized, but the aid on that would be approximately $32 million, because the state of New York will aid a project, whether there are interest costs on the project or not. So by prepaying the principal, we reduce the interest costs, and then the school receives additional aid. So in this example, and it's only an example of a $35 million project, the projected aid on that is $32 million to revitalize this elementary school. In terms of fund balance, the district does expect to be at an operating surplus this year. That's important. We talked about how the state controller measures that and looks at multiple years of a deficit as problematic and a sign of fiscal stress. So we expect to have a fund balance similar to last year's. What we don't have in terms of a liability, which is a good thing, is our tax surcharge exposure has reduced. So some of those claims have settled. So we have less tax surcharge exposure. We'll have, again, a small surplus. We'd like to reallocate, essentially change the naming of some of those fund balance functions from unassigned fund balance from tax surcharge reserve and put a $4 million capital reserve. So we project that the district sort of healthy fund balance being a point that we could reinvest that money into this building in 2 years. There are pivot points within the budget. Everything is cyclical. There will be another recession. There will be state aid decreases in the future. The district has a point where you'll see a small capital project in this out of the general fund that can be reduced in future years if needed. The district continues to have sort of more and more debt fall off that in the future, if needed, can be shifted towards construction. We'll talk about the aid piece for next year. That significant foundation aid increase. So we expect that large jump in state aid in terms of foundation aid. We would like to reduce the increase of the levy. We have to be respectful of the taxpayers, and we'd like to revisit this more as time goes on. But we cannot repeat the zeros from 2009. We have a 2% levy increase projected for next year, and then some budgeted assigned fund balance using debt service reserve like we had talked about for the project that was voted on in December. So these are the tentative revenue sources for next year. This slide here, I know we're all really proud of and how it relates to the 4-5 and the music program. In the budget we're in right now, the team got together and worked and found an availability within the current staffing to add 4th grade band and orchestra at the 4-5 building. And to say it's been a success would be an understatement. So without adding any staff, we are now offering 4th graders an option of band or orchestra, and there's 145 kids participating. What we would like to do in this vote that we have coming up is continue the process of having a small general fund capital project. And a significant part of that will be renovating the middle school band rooms. So when these 4th graders who are so excited about this go there, they can then go to the middle school and continue that excitement in a space that's really appropriate for the setting for the instruction. Again, 72.9% building aid, that's significant. We want to keep these capital projects going and keep that investment in both our spaces, but also the instructional program. So we have to lay out some of the scope. I think what's going to be challenging with projects is even before they started, we want to have every dollar and know the exact timetable is going to be finished. We want to make a major investment in the music spaces in the middle school, a major investment in the art spaces. We hope to have budgeted money to work on both the tech space and there's a fitness area for the middle school. And then at the high school, priorities would be the blue gym bleachers, which are failing, and then a bathroom near them for single occupancy is not up to the standards for which we want it to be. So those are the items within the middle school and high school that would be part of this $1.3 million capital project. Prior year was $1 million. We'd like to continue that investment and have it be $1.3 million. Buses, we had talked about buses a little bit more, so there won't be that second proposition. We have gotten away a little bit in some of these tight times from keeping up with our 7-year bus replacement cycle. COVID was a significant impact, as that really was a hindrance in terms of how we plan and do our bus preparation. So we're going to come back to the board at the 28th and March meeting to talk about the plan to purchase buses. We're going to purchase them in cash. John, go to the next slide. Purchasing buses in cash, where again, there's a high aid ratio. They're aided over a 5-year period, but banning the buses has interest costs, it has legal costs. And so a best practice for school districts is to buy their buses with cash. And now that we're in this healthy position, we'd like to pivot to that. So really important, there are 3 Board of Election seats available in this vote. So 2 seats are for 5-year terms, and 1 seat is filling Amy Malloy's term that we'll act on here. That is a 1-year term, and the lowest vote getter would receive that vote. So I have petitions at my office that can be emailed or stop in. They are due back by April 18th at 5 p.m. So important milestone that we're really at to get input from the board, and as we work through it on the 28th, is that on the 14th board meeting, we would adopt a notice. That would be the notice for the annual budget, the election seats, but also that capital reserve will be part of that notice as well. This is the last slide I have. Is there any questions for Board of Education? Thank you.
Any questions? Anyone online? Any questions for Scott? No?
All good here. Thank you, Scott.
I'm all set. Thank you, Scott.
Ms. Whittemore, thank you very much for that. Come to the point of the meeting of open forum. Some of you may know, we have first open forum is designated to issues regarding tonight's agenda. And then the second open forum will be for general discussion topics for whatever you'd like to address to the board. Just a couple of reminders, it is limited to residents of Queensbury Union Free School District. You need to announce your address and the topic you wish to discuss. And just be respectful, and they'll be limited, as always, to 3 minutes. And Sarah Lang, the Center for Masks, so that'll be the second open forum. And Christina Tucker, is there something on the agenda you wish to discuss, or be something for the second open forum?
Where do parents find this agenda?
It's posted on the website. It is, yeah.
There's no agenda posted on the website. I can pull up your website and show it for you.
Okay, I'm sure it's there.
It's not, you can show us right there. In the we can see it, so we can't make comments on the agenda items if we can't see it.
Okay. Just can't touch it.
No, I got the handout, but how do we prepare a comment on something we just get and walk in here?
We'll take a look at the website, but it's my understanding, and at time I've looked, it's been there. So if there's a problem with that, we'll look into it, make sure it's up in a timely fashion for you.
That's not like but there goes.
Or, no, it's not an agenda item, it is for the second open forum.
I don't have time to sign in. I just have one quick thing
On the budget? Yeah, sure. Or
Good evening, gentlemen. Ladies and gentlemen. Scott, thanks for the budgetary, the information on the budget. The one thing I think you forgot to mention was thanking all the children for the last 2 years of record funding from the state, because we all are aware of the financial reward for masking and vaccinating the kids. So I just wanted to say thank you to the children, and I'll be back here at the end. Thanks.
Recommend that the board approve business item A, motion to accept the resignation of Amy Leroy as the Board of Education member with sincere appreciation and regret effective June 30th, 2022.
Mr. Weaver, second, please.
Second, Pat.
Thank you, Pat. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries with, it is with sincere appreciation and regret. I mean, you'll be sorely missed, that's for sure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Recommend the board approve business consent items B through W.
Before I take a motion for that, B through W, any of the items need to be removed for further discussion by the board? Hearing none, can I have a motion to approve business consent item B through W, please? Thank you. John. Second, please. Second. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Educational items, Mr. Gannon.
I recommend the board move to approve action item A, the motion to accept the resignation for retirement purposes of Karen Bauer, QHS special education teacher, with sincere thanks and regret, effective 6/30/22.
Have a motion, please.
So moved.
Mr. Weaver, second, please.
Second, Pat.
Thank you, Pat. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries.
I recommend the board move to approve action item B, the motion to accept the resignation for retirement purposes of Jackie Bolton, a QES teacher, with sincere thanks and regret, effective 7/1/22.
So moved. Thank you, Fran. Second, please.
Second.
Thank you, Jamie. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries.
I recommend the board move to approve action item C, the motion to accept the resignation for retirement purposes of Amy Brown, a Queensbury Middle School family and consumer science teacher, with sincere thanks and regret, effective 7/1/22.
Motion, please. Thank you, Don. Second, please.
Second.
Thanks, Tim. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions?
I recommend the board move to approve action item D, the motion to accept the resignation for retirement purposes of Christine Backus, a QES speech pathologist, with sincere thanks and regret, effective 7/1/24.
Motion, please. So moved. Second, please.
Second.
Thank you, Tim. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions?
I recommend the board move to approve action item E, the motion to approve the probationary appointment of Megan Lambert to a 4-year probationary appointment as a QES special education teacher.
So moved. Thank you, Fran. Second?
Second.
Thank you, John. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Here. Oh, thank you.
I recommend the board move to approve action item F, Laura McKenna, to a 4-year probationary appointment as a teaching assistant assigned to the Queensbury Elementary School.
Motion, please.
So moved.
Thank you, James. Second? Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Map carries.
I recommend the board move to approve educational consent items G through O.
Before we take a motion, does any of the items G through O need to be removed for further discussion by the board? Hearing none, can I have a motion, please? Thank you, Don. Second? Thanks, Tim. All in favor of educational consent items G through O, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Educational consent items passed. Board committee reports. Finance met, facilities met. Any others? Facilities met. We, Tim, you want to give a rundown?
Sure, we met, spoke about the new upcoming turf field. Went over a lot of detailed work that day, a lot got accomplished. And things are moving forward with that, and everything looks to be in good shape, and further meetings to come.
Finance Committee met, Tim and I, and with Scott and other members of the team. Essentially went over what you heard this evening. In particular, the capital reserve fund was explained in some detail. It's certainly a good idea, very necessary. The chart that he showed that didn't get into much detail, we did dive into a little bit more, but it was, again, example. It's certainly not a proposed project by any stretch at this point, but using the numbers, it makes a great deal of financial sense for the district to do this, to plan ahead. Because the buildings, as you all know, consistently need work. Middle school, and it's going to get a lot of work done. We start this next project, and then right after that, this building needs a fair amount of work. So the teachers and the administrators in this building are participating. Thank you very much. So it'll be some great ideas and some great planning for the kids' futures. Policy with me or anything like that. Okay, board member comments. No comments? Okay. Second open forum. First one signed up is Sarah Lang.
Lance.
I'm sorry?
Lance.
Lance, I'm sorry. C, I apologize. Sarah Lance. Lance, come on right up. Welcome.
Do I just read it?
Okay.
Do I just read it?
Sure.
Masks, we all know about them. The thing that you put on your face quoted to protect you, or something that magically changes your life. The point is, it doesn't. I wore a mask in school, and I still got COVID no matter whether I wore it or not. I feel that it doesn't do anything to help me. It gives me a pounding headaches in school that I shouldn't deserve. Kids shouldn't have to live like this. It's basically torture. I am breathing in my body's exhaust over and over again throughout 7 hours a day for 5 days a week. COVID started in March 2020, and now it is February 2022. Lots of people think that it is unfair that with the new mask mandate, stores don't, and people in stores don't have to wear masks, but what? It's fair to kids that they're forced to wear a mask in school with no choice? As for the vaccine, what does it do? We don't know, and yet you still offer to give the kids a shot on school grounds. I'm standing up for the kids who don't have enough courage to say something. And you let my favorite teacher go, Mr. Trainer, who was just sticking up for his beliefs, who I'm also standing up for because he wanted something. He wanted the same thing I wanted, not to be told what to do with my body. You sold us out for money and we won't forget it.
Christina Tucker.
Does this work now or no?
It's on.
No.
John's off. Yeah, go ahead.
So I can imagine you're sick of hearing me by now, but I couldn't think of a better place to be on Valentine's Day, so here I am again. I know my words will fall upon deaf ears, so I won't give you my opinions. I'll give you the opinions of others. First is the opinion of my daughter. She spoke to you back in November about her opinion of masks as a child in the trenches, and not one of you could even find a small space in your heart to clap for her bravery. That says a lot. The car ride home was interesting that night. Mom, she said, they didn't say anything. I know, Brooklyn, they never do. Don't take it personally, I said. You did a great job. But they spoke to that man before me about sports, she said. I apologize for you to my 11-year-old daughter, so don't worry. After a lot of questions and a lot of I don't knows as answers, she said, so what is their job? I looked up the responsibilities of a school board member. So here is NISBA's opinion of the responsibilities of a school board member. It begins with school children always their ultimate focus. Let me repeat that again. With school children always as their ultimate focus, school board members act officially at the board table, working with other board members to serve students and accomplish the following. 1, create a shared vision for the future of education. So this type of sharing must be like the announcements that are made at the high school. I protect you, you protect me, chanted over and over. And before I continue, I'd like to point out, my child does not protect any of you, nor any of your staff. Children should never have been given this burden, and it's disgusting that this type of indoctrination is occurring is occurring at our children's place of education. Next was set the direction of the school district to achieve the highest student performance and provide rigorous accountability for student achievement results. So this must be referring to those MAP tests that monitor progress no one in the district does anything with. And when my child's scores actually went backward over the past year, no one even noticed but me. And when I asked what the district's plan was to address the COVID-blamed shortfalls, it was a virtual room full of crickets. Next is develop a budget and present it to the community, aligning district resources to improve achievement. So since this is your job duty, I'm officially requesting a copy of the budget that shows how the $7,564,598 is being used that you received to mask our children. That's $2,381.59 per student. Yet a recent post on the school district social media page has recently expressed, and I quote, "This has been our hardest year, yet making sure these kids have enough food." Are you serious? Because there's a shiny new turf field with lights coming, but we didn't make sure all students had enough food this year? Shameful. The next one, support a healthy school district culture for work and learning. I'd like to give you the opinion or definition. Please let me continue. There's two people. I have like 1 minute left. I'd like to give you the opinion or definition of healthy according to the World Health Organization, which states, and I quote, "Health is a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity." So if you are masking our children for health reasons, yet causing more harm than the virus, is that a healthy school district? Let me read that again. Health is a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity.
Sucker asked you to read it once, not twice. That's.
Okay, I
so
won't do that
we're all
again.
set. 3 minutes is up. We're gonna go to the next person.
Okay, so then I can come back up for another 3 minutes after?
Want to sign up again? Sure.
Yep. You want me to
Mr.
come up there?
Ward? All right, I'll recognize you.
Beautiful poster there, the inspired poster, all the kids smiling. Xavier's in that picture. Kyle, you're in that picture. Beautiful. I really think the kids have had a hard time in the last 2 years to be inspired. When they can't see faces, when they can't see smiles, when they can't see the teacher's joy or any type of feeling for each other because they're masked up behind masks. They don't work, masks, by the way, they don't work. CDC has said so, these masks that we all pretend to be wearing, if they're not N95, they don't work. And they do more damage to the kids than the virus. Xavier got COVID a month ago, and I can't be more thankful. I can't be more thankful that my son got COVID, because it was 2 days of maybe a little cough, and now he's free from the discrimination and the attitudes that he gets from the administrators and from the staff in the school because he's not vaccinated, because he doesn't want to wear a mask. He actually had a teacher tell him that he was the cause of the death of Adam Sweeney. I'm sickened when he came home and told me this. Now, my son, some of you know my son is very strong-willed. He took it, he didn't take it to heart. He knew the teacher was being, aggressive in her belief of, her misguided belief of the masks being, preventing this disease from being spread. But that was stated to one of, to my child, to my 14-year-old, the fourth one in the picture over there. They don't work. I hold the administrators, and Kyle, you too, obviously, for creating this environment and being part of this environment. I also hold the board accountable for not voting in regards to the masking of our children, because I think that's your responsibility. I think that's your responsibility to tell the community where you stand specifically. If you vote for it, you vote against it. At least the community knows where you stand when, in this instance, and for future instance, God forbid, we're faced with them again, you should take a stance. So I implore you to vote, even though the masks are going away in the next couple of weeks, we hope. You should take a vote, so people, when they vote you back into office, if you're rerunning or your time comes, you should vote so we all know where you stand. That's it. I don't even want to go into it any further. I'm saddened by what this district has become over the past 3 years. That we're money driven, that we're not leaders. We pretend to say we want to raise leaders in the community, and yet we're all followers. You all here are followers. You just bend the knee. Okay, money's coming, so we'll sacrifice our kids' well-being for the money because maybe in the long run that'll be better. I'm ashamed. I am.
Want to come back up?
Yep.
All right, so the next one was create a strategic partnership with community stakeholders. Well, that one's pretty obvious, right? You can't have partnerships with people you refuse to speak to. Next is hire and evaluate the superintendent. Here's a statement your superintendent sent out on January 25th, the day you know you had sheriffs intimidate children at the door to put a mask on, even though the mandate was null and void. Let me read it to you. All New York State school districts have been contacted by the state education department and have been instructed to continue following the mask mandate. Listen carefully now, and I quote, "The lower court in Nassau County has no jurisdiction over the rest of the state, including our district. If something changes, we'll let our families know." Thank you, Kyle Gannon. I'm just curious if a Supreme Court judge would agree with that statement. There are a few more, including maintaining ethical standards, but I think we get the point. I have 3 more quick opinions I'll give you. The first one is from Elise Stefanik on that day, January 25th. Kathy Hochul and our far left Department of Education are lying to superintendents, causing unnecessary confusion. There's no stay on the court ruling. Kathy Hochul's authoritarian mandate was deemed illegal by the New York Supreme Court. Masks are not mandatory for students, period. Dan Steck, February 12th, just a few days ago, 2 days ago. Masking our children has had a detrimental impact on the emotional and intellectual development of children. The mask mandate should be dropped immediately. And lastly, I'd like to give you my opinion. You have one of the most important jobs in the state of New York right now, and you are failing miserably. Give the money back, save these children, or step aside and let someone else do it. Thanks.
Nothing else to come before the board. We do have need for executive session. Need a motion to go into executive session pursuant to subdivision 1E of the open meetings law to discuss collective negotiations pursuant to Article 14 of the Civil Service Law and pursuant to subdivision 3 of section 108 of the open meetings law to discuss matters made confidential by federal or state law involving attorney-client privilege matters pursuant to section 4503 of the New York Civil Practice Laws and Rules. Can I have a motion to go into executive session, please? So, Weaver, thank you. Second? Thank you, Don. All in favor of going to executive session? Aye. Any opposed? Thank you all for coming. Appreciate your attendance, both in person and online. Thank you.